It's Thursday, July 28th, and if there's one number that usually defines a recession, well, this would be the one. We start here. Economists are bracing for what could be the most confusing recession of our lifetime.
I'd say any negative number is bad news.
But many Americans already feel like they're living in one, so what could change later today? The State Department puts a deal on the table to get back captives in Russia.
He's nicknamed the Merchant of Death. That's what the media dubbed him.
What and who the U.S. might be willing to give up. And criminal charges could be coming over January 6th, but how high could they go?
They're getting closer into that inner circle.
A grand jury is keeping Washington on pins and needles. From ABC News, this is Start Here. I'm Brad Milkey. A big story developed yesterday afternoon that could affect the climate for years to come. It will also affect the economic climate as well. So you remember that right after President Biden passed his huge infrastructure bill last year, he wanted to go even bigger, and he would say better.
My Build Back Better plan is going to make it a giant difference in your life.
This Build Back Better bill is not going to increase inflation. It will diminish inflation.
Nothing will cut costs for American families more than the Build Back Better plan.
This was a bill that would dramatically reimagine how much government money would be spent on clean energy, as well as the so-called care economy. This was to provide more than $500 billion for childcare, preschools, tax credits for parents, along with another $500 billion for green initiatives. And to Democrats, the brilliant part about this was you didn't need the usual 60 votes in the Senate. As long as it's considered a budget bill, you can push through a reconciliation package with only 50. The problem was, Democrats didn't have 50 votes. They had 49 and Joe Manchin.
Senator Manchin and I are going to get something done.
Well, yesterday, after a year, Democratic leaders reached an agreement with Manchin to pass a bill that will devote massive sums to health care and clean energy goals. It could be passed by next week, which is interesting because you'll recall why Manchin wasn't on board.
I just want to make sure we find a balance and something we can afford and do it right, whatever we do.
The West Virginia senator said his problem was not with clean energy. It was that spending all this money, he said, could lead to runaway inflation, maybe even a recession. Well, later today, we will actually get a key indicator of whether that is already happening. Remember, an economic recession means the economy is shrinking. It means a country's doing less business. Usually you measure that through our gross domestic product. You add up all the value of the stuff that we make and sell in a year. That is our GDP. Remember those three letters, because if GDP goes down for 2 quarters in a row, the thinking goes, congratulations, your country's in a recession. Well, last quarter, our GDP did go down. Today, we'll learn if it's happened again. So, what do all these numbers mean? I want to start the day with an economist. Jason Furman is the professor of the practice of economic policy at Harvard. Professor Furman, biggest question first, I think. Today, are we about to learn that our country is officially in a recession?
I wish today was the day we would learn that. There is so much economic data right now that is so vexing and confusing that it would be great to have a simple answer to a simple question. Unfortunately, the GDP numbers will not tell us whether or not we're in a recession.
We have a strong labor market, which you don't normally see in a recession.
Recessions in the United States are determined by a group of academic economists housed at the National Bureau of Economic Research. And they look at a wide range of indicators, not just at GDP. And a lot of the numbers they look at are things like jobs, which are actually going up lately, not going down. So in many important respects, it doesn't look like a recession.
Wow, okay, and we'll get to the jobs in just a second. In terms of this GDP number, is there an expectation in terms of a number? And when we see this number, what's good, what's bad, what's very bad?
The expectation now is around -1. I'd say any negative number is bad news, no matter what you put on it. Even a low positive number is pretty disappointing at a time when the economy is in a precarious position. So I think likely to be bad news no matter what you call it, but definitely shouldn't call it a recession until we see a much wider set of data.
Yeah, and what would make a recession? To you, is it jobs? Is that the thing that really makes a recession?
Look, in my research and my work, I just use what the National Bureau of Economic Research says. They look very carefully. Jobs are one of the most important factors. They're also looking at how much industrial production there is. They're looking at what is happening to incomes after taxes and a few other aspects of the economy. And almost all of those are monthly data, and almost all of those are actually still going up or flat and not yet going down.
About this economy right now, because the last recession we've heard about was 2007, 2008, 2009. What makes this so different from that right now? Because it doesn't seem the same at all from a numbers perspective.
Yeah, we are seeing the largest disconnect right now between the amount of jobs that are being added and the amount that GDP is falling.
Based on consumer spending, based on payroll employment, based on where the unemployment rate is, I think we can confidently say that these numbers that we're posting are very much inconsistent with a recessionary call given where we are right now.
Normally those move in the same direction. You're adding jobs and the economy is growing. Occasionally they move in opposite directions, but what's amazing is just how opposite those directions are right now. Could be that something's wrong with the numbers we're looking at and the government's calculating them wrong. Or it could be that something is genuinely happening where businesses are hiring people, but those people aren't producing as much as they used to produce.
Yeah, and when it comes to consumer spending, right, that seems like one of the big issues and one of the big disconnects here, right? People are spending money even though, like, prices are rising. We're in this consumer-based economy, so I'm trying to understand, like, if consumer spending goes down right now based on interest rates, based on all these, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? People spending less money on stuff.
Right. Almost everything in the economy right now, it's not obvious whether it going down is a good thing or a bad thing. It probably depends on how much. So if consumer spending rises at about a 1% annual rate, which is the number expected right now, that's probably fine. If it was incredibly fast growth, I'd actually be nervous that it was driving inflation. If consumer spending fell, I'd be worried that households were, cutting back too much. But some sort of moderate to low number is probably the sweet spot. But, it's hard to know.
If there's a recession, if your boys at the National Economic whatever say, yes, in fact, we've been in a recession, does that mean there's been a failure by the Fed to walk this line that they're trying to walk, where they're trying to tamp down inflation without people losing their jobs and without this big recession?
I think ex post, when you look back on it, you'd say yes. They did too much too fast. But these are impossible things to figure out in advance. And I personally think they're getting the balance about right in a job that is, almost impossible at the current moment.
All right, we'll keep an eye on the number today and try to figure out if and when we've entered into this economic downturn that so many economists are worried about. Jason Furman from Harvard, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Next up on Start Here, he looks like the stereotype of a Russian arms dealer, but could he also be the key to freeing 2 Americans? We're back in a bit.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers.
In Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
Here at the White House.
Destructive Cat 4 storm.
Here along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go. We made it.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7 straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a 3rd hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
You never know what you're going to get on this show. That's all I'm going to tell you.
Yes, Whoopi!
Is this mic on? Can you hear me out there? behind the scenes is always a better show.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's what people don't see during the commercial break.
Right, they don't.
What happened?
I had no idea really what I was getting myself into.
That day that we walked out, I treasure that day. I couldn't sit there.
You're doing good, Joy. You're doing good.
Oh, yeah, baby. It was crazy.
Behind the Table. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Elizabeth Holmes found guilty on 4 counts of fraud, facing the possibility of decades in prison. Now, we take you inside the courtroom and behind the scenes. The Dropout, Elizabeth Holmes on trial. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
National parks are incredibly safe places, but crime will happen.
Hey, Mama. My wife has fallen. She's in really critical condition.
At that time, I thought it was just a tragic accident.
There's still a lot of questions we need to ask.
There were small things that didn't totally add up.
This is 2 lives for Harold that have died now. I was shocked. Something's not right.
Right now, with so much at stake, Sunday mornings, this is the place. Taking on all the tough questions, straightforward reporting, no spin, no hype, no bull. Thank you for making ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos the #1 Sunday morning news show versus the competition.
Welcome to This Week.
Things are looking pretty dire for Brittney Griner right now.
I did not plan or have the intent to bring any cannabis or banned substance to Russia.
Remember, the WNBA superstar was passing through a Russian airport when she was arrested. In court yesterday, she admitted to the possession of cannabis oil.
I do plead guilty because of the actions that have happened, but I, again, did not intend to do this.
She told the court she had a legal prescription but did not intend to bring any contraband into Russia. In a country with a 99% conviction rate, it's possible she was looking for leniency, but the Russian government has not sounded very lenient.
In the coming days, I expect to speak with Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov for the first time since the war began.
And as if to highlight how dire the situation has become, yesterday the Biden administration announced it might be ready to offer a deal for the release of Griner and another detained American, Paul Whelan, which could perhaps include a prisoner swap for someone who was thought to be off the table.
We put a substantial proposal on the table weeks ago to facilitate their release.
ABC's Patrick Reevell has been in touch with all the families of all these Americans. He's in Ukraine right now. Patrick, can you walk us through this deal that the White House might be offering?
Hi, Brad. Yeah, I mean, firstly, we should say that right now we don't know for sure what it is that the White House is proposing to the Russians. You know, Secretary Blinken said that a substantial proposal is being made.
We've conveyed this on a number of occasions and directly to Russian officials. And my hope would be that in speaking to Foreign Minister Lavrov, I can advance the efforts to bring them home.
I think the question is this proposal a prisoner swap? Generally, we think it most likely is, because this is how really these sort of releases happen. And in particular, we know that the Russians have been asking to try and make a prisoner swap. The person we believe that any prisoner swap would involve right now is Victor Bout, who is a notorious arms dealer. He's been in a US prison for 15 years. And we know that the Russians have been asking for him, and we believe that the Russians actually took Paul Whelan prisoner 3.5 years ago, with partly in the hope of getting Victor Bout out.
From the moment I was arrested, I was told that Russia wants Victor Bout. They don't like the fact that Russian citizens can be arrested in third-party countries, extradited to America, and then have to serve time in American prisons for crimes that didn't occur in America.
As far as we understand from what Secretary Blinken was saying, they've already been putting forward a deal. Does that mean that the Americans have been offering for some time Victor Bout and the Russians have been saying no? And the big question, honestly, when we've been hearing this is why have they gone public with it before the meeting? Because honestly, usually in these situations, we only learn about the prisoner swap and the possible deal afterwards. And, you know, in the case of Trevor Reed, for example, we only knew that he'd been released once he was already in the air, I should say, even headed towards the US.
Yeah, is there a sense of what game the State Department is playing here by publicly offering this to Russia before it's even been agreed to?
I mean, honestly, we can only really speculate why they would have done that. I mean, it's possible that they know the Russians are moving and that there's some advantage from going public beforehand. I think the worry would be that actually they've had this deal on the table for some time, and for some reason the Russians are not accepting it, and that this is an attempt to try and put it into the public spotlight in the hope that the Russians somehow will feel some type of pressure to go for the deal. I mean, one of the challenges we know is that the Russians are obsessed with the idea of reciprocity. And so if you offer one person for two, they will actually be insisting on having two for two. But frankly, we just don't know. And, you know, this is all speculation in the end. But, you know, there's certainly some kind of movement around this at the moment.
Yeah. And as far as this arms dealer, Victor Bout, I mean, why would Russia care so much about a convicted Russian arms deal? What would be the appeal here for the Russians?
So Victor Bout, arguably the world's most famous arms dealer.
If they stating I'm the biggest arms dealer, so where is the proof of this? Do you see anywhere any single fact?
He's nicknamed the Merchant of Death. That's what the media dubbed him. And, you know, there's a movie about him. I mean, Nicolas Cage played him in a movie called Lord of War.
Tell me I'm everything you despise. That I'm the personification of evil. That I'm what? Responsible for the breakdown of the fabric of society and world order.
Back in the late 1990s, early 2000s, was running what is probably the largest arms trafficking network in the world. He had a fleet of Soviet aircraft because after the Soviet Union fell, he was able to gain access to a huge amount of weaponry. We know the Russians have been asking for him for a long time, and we know that for a long time the US was very unwilling to do it because, frankly, he was a major criminal figure.
He was apprehended in the final stages of arranging the sale of millions of dollars of high-powered weapons to people he believed to represent a known terrorist organization, the FARC.
It's widely believed he had connections to Russian intelligence, but whatever intelligence value he had appears to be exhausted now because he's been in a US prison for 15 years. It's very unlikely that he's going to be able to go back to his previous activities.
I don't care if it's 100 Victor Bouts.
As Trevor Reed said to me after he was released,
Victor Bout has already been in prison for 15 years.
He's served 15 years. Maybe that isn't quite as long as the US government would like him to have been punished for, but it's certainly not nothing. I mean, I think one of the reasons they're more willing to consider trading someone like Victor Bout right now is because of the trade they made for Trevor Reed. You know, I think the White House seems to have become more comfortable with the idea of trading Russians who've been in prison for a long time when you can get Americans out. But the huge question is, like, will the Russians go for the deal or not?
Well, and so then is there a sense of how necessary this deal is to happen now when it comes to the condition of Brittney Griner and of Paul Whelan? How high are the stakes?
I think that the stakes have been high for quite a while. I mean, I think Paul Whelan has been in a terrible situation for 3.5 years. He's in a prison camp.
This camp is old. It was used for prisoners of war during World War II. It was used during the Gulag days of the Soviet Union.
It's obviously not a good place for anyone's health or mental well-being. I think Brittney Griner, I think the urgency is that her trial is ongoing right now.
How do you feel? Do you have any complaints?
No complaints. But ultimately, you know, I think there's a lot of attention around Brittney Griner because of her fame and because of her stature in the US. As a result, the Biden administration appears to be moving much quicker on it than they did around Paul Whelan, for example.
Yeah, big disclosure here, unusual disclosure, which is what perked up the ears of so many people covering national security. Patrick Reevell in Ukraine, thank you so much.
Thanks, Brad.
As the Congressional Committee on January 6th wrapped up the final hearing of its summer series, the big question was, okay, Congress can't charge anyone with a crime here, only the Justice Department can do that. So would they? Well, there have now been several key headlines this week, so let's get into it with ABC's Catherine Falders, who's been tracking all these investigations. Catherine, the biggest story of the week was clearly the Department of Justice might be looking at the former president himself. Could they actually charge Donald Trump with a crime?
Well, Brad, that's the big question, and a lot of this is impossible to know. But what we do know and what we have learned is that witnesses are appearing before grand juries. We know there's at least 3 grand juries in Washington investigating the events of January 6th.
We're told former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson is among those now cooperating with DOJ as they investigate Trump's role in the scheme to prevent Congress from certifying Joe Biden's win on January 6th.
So witnesses have been appearing before the grand jury, and they're being asked more specific questions as it relates to Trump, as it relates to his actions surrounding January 6th. They're getting closer into that inner circle and asking questions specifically about him. We've known that they're investigating the fake electors, that they're investigating the planning of the rally. But this is the first time that we're really learning the scope and the extent of what they are looking at and what they're asking.
Right, and just so everyone remembers how this works, grand jury takes place behind closed doors, and prosecutors are convincing the grand jury in some cases to hand out indictments to certain people. You convince that grand jury, you get an indictment. So then the question is, who's coming in to see the grand jury, and what do they know? What are they telling them? We've now learned that Mark Short, the former chief of staff to Vice President Mike Pence, was talking to the grand jury. Is there a sense of what these witnesses are communicating and who would be affected by that?
Yeah, so this happened last week, and it was Mark Short, Pence's former chief of staff, and also Pence's former chief counsel in the White House, Greg Jacob, 2 very senior officials.
Short not mincing words about the dangers that day.
If the mob had gotten closer to the vice president, I do think there would have been a massacre in the Capitol that day.
They were involved in conversations with that Trump lawyer, John Eastman, for example, who was pushing these wild theories that Pence could overturn the election.
Even though conservative attorney John Eastman was among multiple advisors and White House lawyers who told Trump the plan to overturn the election result was illegal, Eastman still aggressively pushed the scheme, later asking for a presidential pardon unsuccessfully.
It shows the scope of this is broadening, and the investigation is definitely entering another phase. And I mentioned John Eastman earlier. Also important here, the former Trump lawyer who got his phone seized last month. Just yesterday, the federal investigators have revealed that there's a second search warrant, that they obtained a second search warrant on his phone to then actually search the contents. And look, I think it will be interesting to see who else we spot at the grand jury. You know that Mark Short was just caught on those cameras. We could see him walking in to the DC District Court.
Well, I was subpoenaed by a grand jury, and I complied with that subpoena. But
so we'll have our cameras again there on Friday. We'll see.
Hey, how willing is the Justice Department to go up the food chain this high? Because the DOJ has said before, we don't indict sitting presidents. That's just not the case. I mean, what is the threshold you have to clear, though, to indict a former president or even a potential president if President Trump decides to run again?
Yeah, I know there's a lot of speculation, about what Merrick Garland will actually decide to do here, right? Obviously, the bar is really high for a former president, for, as you just mentioned, deciding to run again, a candidate for president, a sitting president.
This effort to upend a legitimate election, transferring power from one administration to another, cuts at the fundamental of American democracy.
And look, Brad, Merrick Garland has been on record essentially saying nobody is above the law. He told reporters this a couple weeks ago. He told NBC News that DOJ plans to prosecute anybody who was criminally responsible for interfering with the peaceful transfer of power from one administration to the other.
We pursue justice without fear or favor.
So look, I think obviously it's a high bar, but I think what we're seeing here, Brad, and especially with this example of John Eastman's cell phone, the feds, in order to secure these warrants, they have to convince a judge that there are potential crimes here. So it's clear that they're zeroing in and narrowing in. And look, at the end of the day, we don't know. But the other thing we don't know is whether or not DOJ has opened a criminal investigation into Trump.
And you don't often hear about the results of these investigations until sometimes well after things have been decided. So I know you'll be keeping your eyes peeled. Catherine Falders, thank you.
Thanks, Brad.
And one last thing. Crime rates in Japan are exceptionally low, but this week there have been a disturbing number of assaults by monkeys.
The animals injured 8 people in the city of Yamaguchi over the weekend.
In Yamaguchi, Japan, near the southwest tip of the island, dozens of people have reported being attacked by what they describe as this rogue troop of Japanese macaque monkeys. Might sound like a cute problem to have until you hear the details of these attacks. In several cases, the macaques have broken into apartments and bitten the humans who dare stand in their way.
I heard a scream, so I went to see what's happening. I'm a little worried.
In another instance, they invaded an elementary school classroom and went after children. There are now about 50 victims in this town.
When confronted by a monkey, authorities say do not look it in the eye. Make yourself look as big as possible and back away slowly.
While residents have reported seeing these monkeys move together, it's been unclear if the actual biting has been the work of maybe just one male. Well, yesterday, a male attacker was caught. Authorities are hoping now the attacks will cease. In the meantime, locals say they've resorted to carrying umbrellas on their walks around town, not for protection from the sun or the rain, but from the monkeys. Hey, something we've really been excited about here. You heard that climate news to start the show? Well, for several weeks, our team has been digging into a climate story that is not about congressional bills. It's not about federal budgets or policies. It's about how regular Americans are dealing with this climate crisis and what happens when neighbors start arguing over how to take steps towards cleaner energy. We got on-the-ground reporting. We got solar farmers. We got these 2 families that have this Hatfield and McCoy's thing happening. You will definitely want to check out this episode tomorrow. Start Here is produced by Kelly Therese, Jen Newman, Brenda Salinas Baker, Louis Millman, Madeline Wood, Vika Aronson, Iru Ekpanobi, and Tara Gimbel. Ariel Chester is our social media producer. Josh Cohan is director of podcast programming. I'm our managing editor. Liz Alessi is the head of ABC Audio. Thanks to Lakia Brown, John Newman, and our intern, Nia McLean. Special thanks this week to Zunaira Zaki, Sony Salzman, Eric Strauss, Daniel Manzo, Chris Berry, and Alyssa Pone. I'm Brad Milkey. I'll see you tomorrow.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you?
How cute. Yes. So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show. These days, with so much going on, it's hard to keep up.
While others are recapping yesterday's headlines,
we're bringing you the right now.
This is the busy border crossing, steel barricades, another strike.
The right now look at the day ahead, how it affects you and your family.
Record high gas prices.
The threat of cyber warfare.
Is peace possible?
World News Now beginning at 2 a.m. Eastern, followed by America This Morning.
America's #1 early morning news.
Streaming here on ABC News Live.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers.
In Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
Here at the White House.
Destructive Cat 4 storm.
Here along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go. We made it.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
Take America's #1 news with you anywhere you go, anytime, free. Download the ABC News app now. Breaking news, exclusives, 24/7. There for you with one touch. The ABC News app. Download it now.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
America is being poisoned with fentanyl, and we don't even know it.
Just heard my wife screaming. She told me they had just died.
50 to 100 times more potent than morphine.
Keep breathing, come on.
It's poison. It's pure poison.
A few grains of salt worth of fentanyl will kill you.
Just my agency has seized enough to kill the entire country.
ABC News Live presents Poisoned, America's Fentanyl Crisis. The powerful series, streaming free on ABC News Live.
So what's good to read this summer? Well, Kate and I have decided to jump in and help you.
And we're talking with Oprah, John Irving, and so many popular authors and influencers.
So we want you to join us. Myself, Charlie Gibson, and my daughter, Kate Gibson.
Oh, hey, that's me.
That is you. For the new podcast series, it is called The Bookcase with Kate and Charlie.
We will make sure you love what you read.
Listen anywhere and anytime. The Bookcase Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts.
Right now on America This Morning, a crucial report on the economy's overall health released today. Will it show another negative quarter? And does that mean we're in a recession? The White House and some economists giving two different answers.
Prisoner swap proposal. The White House offering a deal to release 2 Americans held in Russia, including WNBA star Brittney Griner. New details about the Russian prisoner they could be swapped for. This as Griner describes her arrest in court, which she says an interpreter did not do.
A child's theme park now facing a class action lawsuit after videos appeared to show characters ignoring black children. Sesame Place is now responding to the allegations.
Plus, new guidance on LASIK surgery and the potential risks from the eye procedure.
Ditching its classic look, the big change coming to Sprite after 60 years.
And proof of the mythical monster, why scientists are saying the existence of the Loch Ness Monster is plausible. It's Thursday, July 28th.
From ABC News in New York, this is America This Morning.
Good Thursday morning, everyone. We begin with the release of a crucial economic report in just hours.
Experts are forecasting the quarterly report will show a second straight decline in growth. Some economists call that a recession.
But the White House doesn't see it that way. Today, the Commerce Department releases its much-anticipated report revealing whether America's economy is in a recession, depending who you ask. The report could show America's gross domestic product in the negative for a second consecutive quarter. Some economists say that's technically a recession. But the White House disagrees, highlighting areas of strength, including job growth.
The way that we see is that we are not currently in a recession or a pre-recession.
It comes after the Federal Reserve raised interest rates by 0.75 percentage point yesterday, the 4th rate hike this year. Now, there are some indications the rate increases are working toward the Fed's goal to slow down the amount Americans are spending in order to ease the record high inflation.
The slowdown in home sales, consumer spending starting to pull back a little bit, even consumer confidence now lower for the 3rd straight month. And this past week, Walmart cut its profit outlook, saying that higher prices for gas, fuel, and just about everything else, squeezing people's pocketbooks.
Fed Chair Jerome Powell admits it's a difficult task.
We're not trying to have a recession, and we don't think we have to. We think that there's a path for us to be able to bring inflation down while sustaining a strong labor market. We continue to think that there's a path to that. We know that the path has clearly narrowed.
And this morning, gas prices, a major contributor to inflation, are still falling, down 60 cents from a month ago. But the cost of diesel fuel, which many businesses rely on, is coming down at a much slower pace. The New York